There is a particular kind of silence that hangs over the cul-de-sac at 6:43 in the morning on a Tuesday. It isn't the heavy, dead silence of 3 a.m., the kind that feels like the world has stopped breathing and you are the only soul left awake to monitor the shadows. No, the 6:43 a.m. silence is vibrating. It's a tension. It is the deep indrawn breath before the plunge. It is the sound of dew evaporating off the well-manicured fescue lawns, the microscopic shifting of vinyl siding as the sun begins to heat the eastern facades of the houses, and the very faint, rhythmic ticking of cooling engines in driveways where the early risers have already departed. I was positioned, as I always am, at the primary observation post, second floor, guest bedroom, the window facing north-northwest. This vantage point offers a slightly oblique but strategically superior view of the Harrison residence across the street at number 42. Direct observation is amateur hour. People feel eyes on them when you look straight on.
But from an angle, from behind the slats of the Venetian blinds, which I keep dusted specifically to prevent sneeze-induced camera shake, you become invisible. You become part of the architecture. You become the house itself, watching. My coffee was cooling on the sill. I prefer a dark roast, Colombian, black, because sugar makes the mind jittery and milk coats the throat, and when you need to be silent, you cannot afford the sticky click of a mucus-laden swallow. I hadn't taken a sip in 20 minutes. The ceramic mug was acting as a paperweight for my logbook, holding down the page dated October 24th. The subject of interest this morning was not Greg Harrison. Greg is a man of predictable geometry. He leaves at 6:15 a.m. He drives a silver sedan that is washed every Saturday. He wears suits that are varying shades of gray and navy. He is a man who exists in 2 dimensions, flat and uncomplicated. He had left exactly on time, reversing out of the driveway with the caution of a man who fears his own insurance premiums. No, the subject was Linda Harrison.
The woman who buys organic kale but throws it out in the non-compost bin 3 days later. I've seen it. I've logged it. At 6:44 a.m., the street was empty. A squirrel, a reddish-brown thing with a scarred tail, skittered across the asphalt, pausing in the middle of the road to twitch its nose at a discarded gum wrapper. I focused the binoculars, Bushnell 12x50s, tripod-mounted, on the wrapper. Juicy fruit, tinfoil glinting. Not from this neighborhood. We are a sugar-free gum community, mostly spearmint. This was an anomaly, but a minor one. I made a mental note to check the wind patterns later to see if it had blown in from the turbulent, unsupervised chaos of Maple Street, 2 blocks over. Then the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a pressure change. The air grew heavier. And then the rumble. The low, throaty purr of an engine that didn't belong to the Harrison fleet. Linda drove a white SUV, a sensible, high-safety rating Fortress on wheels. But the vehicle turning the corner wasn't the SUV. It was a taxi.
A yellow, battered Crown Victoria, a relic of a bygone era, with a suspension that groaned audibly as it negotiated the gentle curve of our cul-de-sac. It looked like a bruise on the pristine skin of the neighborhood. The rust around the wheel wells was visible even without the magnification, jagged orange scabs eating away at the metal. I leaned in, the cold rubber of the eye cups pressing against my orbital sockets. My breath hitched, fogging the glass of the window for a split second before I wiped it away with the sleeve of my flannel robe. Egyptian cotton, breathable, silent. The taxi slowed. It didn't pull into the driveway. That would be too bold, too declaring of presence. It stopped at the curb, directly in front of the mailbox that Greg had repainted hunter green 3 weeks ago. The brake lights flared, 2 angry red eyes in the morning mist. The back door opened. First the leg, a heel, sleek and black, hitting the pavement. Then the ankle,
followed by the rest of Linda Harrison. She looked disassembled. That is the only word for it.
Usually, Linda is a sculpture of hairspray and yoga-toned precision. But at 6:45 a.m., stepping out of a rusted taxi, she looked like a puzzle put together in the dark. Her hair, usually a blonde helmet of perfection, was loose, fraying at the edges, static clinging to the collar of her trench coat. The coat itself was buttoned wrong. I adjusted the focus wheel with my index finger, zooming in on the buttons. Yes, the third button was pushed for the fourth hole. The fabric bunched awkwardly at her sternum, creating a pucker that looked like a scar in the wool. She didn't look back at the driver. She didn't wave. She didn't wait for a receipt. She simply slammed the door with a force that rattled the neighborhood watch sign on the telephone pole 3 yards away. The taxi didn't linger. The driver, a shadow behind dirty glass, gunned the engine and peeled away, leaving a plume of blue-gray exhaust that hung in the air like a phantom. Linda stood there on the sidewalk. She wasn't moving toward the house. She was swaying, just slightly.
Like a sapling in a breeze that I couldn't feel from my window. And she was clutching it. The purse. I knew Linda's inventory of accessories. I have a subsection in the logbook dedicated to it. There is the beige tote for groceries, the black clutch for dinner dates, the sensible navy crossbody for trips to the city. This was none of those.
This bag was enormous. It was a monstrosity of oxblood leather, slouchy and unstructured, with gold hardware that caught the morning sun and threw sharp, blinding glints of light across the street, one of which struck my window. I blinked, momentarily dazzled, but didn't look away. The bag looked heavy. It dragged down her right shoulder, pulling her posture into a painful-looking droop. It looked like it contained a bowling ball or a head. She took a step toward the driveway, her heels clicking an uneven staccato on the concrete. Click-clack, pause, scrape, click. She reached the edge of the lawn. She stopped. She looked left, toward the Johnsons' house. They were asleep. They never rise before 7:15. She looked right, toward my house. I froze. Total stillness. I became the statue. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird, but I did not blink. I willed my pupils not to dilate. Through the slats, through the glass, through the distance, she couldn't see me. I knew the physics of it. The exterior light was brighter than the interior gloom of my guest room. To her, my window was a black mirror reflecting the sky. But still, the paranoia is a cold finger down the spine. She stared right at my window for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then she bent over. It happened in slow motion. The heavy oxblood bag slipped from her shoulder. The strap, a thick braided leather rope, slid down her arm, over the fabric of the trench coat, over her wrist, and the bag hit the ground. It didn't thud. It squelched. That was the first indicator. A leather bag filled with keys and wallets and makeup thuds. It clatters. It makes a dry, hard sound. This sound was wet. It was the sound of a boot pulling out of deep mud. It was the sound of a melon being dropped on wet grass. The clasp, a pretentious gold buckle shaped like a lion's head, popped open upon impact. And then the wind shifted. The morning breeze in our valley usually flows south to north, carrying the scent of pine from the ridge and the faint, sweet smell of the bakery on Main Street. But today, a rogue current, a thermal eddy swirling around the heat of the asphalt, picked up the air directly surrounding Linda Harrison's dropped purse and carried it in a straight, unwavering line across the street, up the incline of my lawn, over the rhododendrons, and through the microscopic gaps in my window frame, which I had been meaning to caulk since last November. I smelled it before I fully processed what she was doing. I gagged. It was a physical reflex, violent and immediate. I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to stifle the retch.
The smell was unholy. It was complicated. A connoisseur of neighborhood scents knows the palate. Cut grass, dryer sheets, barbecue smoke, dog manure, rain on asphalt. This was none of those. It hit the back of my throat with a metallic tang. It tasted like copper and old pennies. But beneath the metal, there was something organic and rotting. It was the sweet, cloying stench of decay. Not garbage decay. That smells like sour milk and coffee grounds. This was the decay of something that had once been alive.
It was the smell of the marshes down by the river, when the tide goes out and leaves the crabs to bake in the sun. It was distinctively marine, but corrupted. Brackish water, algae, dead fish. And layered over that, fighting for dominance in the olfactory assault, was a cologne. It was aggressive. It was a musk so strong it felt like it was burning the nasal hairs. It wasn't Greg's cologne. Greg wears cool water or something equally benign and department store safe. This scent was expensive, oily, and heavy. It smelled like sandalwood, tobacco, and something animalistic like ambergris. It was the kind of cologne a man wears when he wants to mask the scent of gin and regret. The combination, the rotting swamp water and the aggressive, oily musk, created a dissonance that made my eyes water. Linda was scrambling now. She wasn't just picking up the bag, she was wrestling with it. She had dropped to her knees on the driveway, ruining the stockings, I noted. A tear was forming on the left knee, a jagged run racing down her calf like a lightning bolt. Her hands were frantic. She was shoving things back inside the gaping maw of the oxblood leather. I zoomed in. I adjusted the focus until the image was razor sharp. The depth of field was shallow, blurring the house behind her, isolating her hands and the bag in a crystal-clear tableau of panic. What was she touching? I saw a flash of fabric, wet fabric. It looked like a shirt or a rag, dark and sodden. It was stained a deep brownish green. She shoved it deep into the bottom of the bag. Then, something hard. A bottle? No. It was a shoe. A man's shoe. A loafer. One single, muddy, brown leather loafer. It was caked in gray slime. Not garden dirt. Not the rich black loam we buy from the garden center for $8.99 a bag. This was clay. Gray, sticky, river-bottom clay. She jammed the shoe into the purse, the heel catching on the lining. She exerted force, her face contorting into a grimace that bared her teeth. I saw her makeup then, up close through the lenses. It was a disaster. Mascara had run down her cheeks in twin rivers of black grief. Her lipstick was smeared across her chin. She looked like she had been crying for hours, or perhaps screaming. She finally managed to close the lion head clasp. She stood up, swaying again. The heavy bag now clutched to her chest like a shield. She looked around one last time, her eyes darting with the frenetic energy of a trapped animal. She wiped her hands on her trench coat, a fatal error for someone trying to hide evidence. Now the gray slime was on the beige wool. She turned and marched toward the front door. She didn't use her key. She fumbled in the side pocket of the bag, avoiding the main compartment, and pulled out a hide-a-key rock. No, she didn't use a rock. She punched a code into the keypad lock. Beep, 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 beep. I watched her fingers. 198 something. I missed the last digit because a bird flew across my field of vision. A cardinal. A flash of red that broke my concentration. I cursed silently. The door clicked open. She slipped inside. The door closed. The heavy oak barrier shut with a finality that echoed across the street. I sat back, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The smell lingered in my room, a ghost of the event. I stood up and walked to the window, unlocking the sash and sliding it up 2 inches to let in fresh air, though I feared the outside air was now contaminated by the invisible cloud of her arrival. I returned to the desk. I opened the logbook. I picked up my pen, a Pilot G2, 0.7 millimeters, blue ink.
Entry 06:52 a.m. Subject, Linda Harrison. Status, highly irregular. Observations. Subject arrived via taxi. Yellow Crown Vic, no visible medallion number. Subject disheveled. Clothing misaligned. Emotional state, distress, panic. Subject carrying non-standard luggage. Oxblood leather tote, oversized. Key incident. Bag dropped. Contents partially revealed. 1. Male loafer, heavily soiled with gray clay/mud. Unidentified wet textile. Olfactory evidence. Strong odor detected from approximately 70 feet. Profile, marine decay, swamp, estuary. Sulfur, high-end male fragrance, musk, tobacco, amber. I put the pen down. I looked at the words. They didn't capture the feeling. The feeling was wrongness. The Harrison marriage was a construct of perfect appearances. Greg was the breadwinner, the reliable stone. Linda was the ornament, the social glue, the keeper of the immaculate home. They threw garden parties. They sent Christmas cards with photos of them wearing matching sweaters in Aspen. But swamp mud? A single man's shoe?
A smell that made a grown man gag from across the street? This wasn't just an affair. If it were a simple affair, she would smell like cheap motel soap or sex. She wouldn't smell like the bottom of a river. I needed more data. I spent the next hour monitoring the house. The blinds at 42 remained drawn. No movement in the windows. No lights flicked on, despite the gloom of the overcast morning. The house was swallowing her. At 7:30 a.m., the garbage truck usually comes. Today, however, is Tuesday. Garbage day is Thursday. Recycling is Friday. This was a crucial variable. If she wanted to dispose of the bag's contents, she couldn't just put it on the curb. She would have to hide it within the house or take it somewhere. But she had no car. Her SUV was in the driveway, but she had arrived in a taxi. Why? Where was the SUV? I grabbed the logbook again. Correction to previous assumption. I stood up and looked at the driveway. The white SUV was there. I had assumed she took a taxi because her car was gone, but her car was there. So she had left the house without her car.
Or she had left the car there, been picked up by someone, and returned in a taxi. This changed the timeline. When did she leave? I flipped back a page in the logbook. Yesterday, 22 p.m., lights out at 42. Quiet night. I had gone to sleep at 11 p.m. She must have left after that. A midnight excursion. I went to the kitchen to refill my coffee. The smell of the brewing pot helped mask the phantom stench of the swamp that seemed to be stuck in my sinuses. As I poured the dark liquid, I formulated a plan. I needed to get closer. I needed to verify the smell and, if possible, identify the soil sample on the driveway. But I couldn't just walk over there. I needed a pretext. The mail. I often accidentally receive the Harrisons' mail. It's a delicate game I play with the postman, a nod and a wink, sometimes a misdirection. But the mail hadn't come yet. The lawn. I could edge the lawn, the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street. It brings me within 10 feet of their driveway. I went to the garage. I put on my work boots, sturdy, rubber-soled. I put on my canvas work pants. I grabbed the edger. It's an electric model, fairly quiet, but loud enough to justify my presence and mask the sound of my footsteps. I walked out my front door. The air outside was still tainted. It was fainter now, diffused by the breeze, but as I crossed the street, ostensibly to check the property line, my property line does not extend across the street, but boundaries are a mental construct. The scent grew stronger. I reached the edge of their driveway. I pretended to inspect a crack in the asphalt near the curb. There it was, the impact site. A small puddle of fluid where the bag had landed. It hadn't evaporated yet. It was viscous, slightly oily. It shimmered with a rainbow sheen, like gasoline on water, but the color was murky brown. I knelt down, pretending to tie my bootlace. I took a deep breath through my nose. The smell was overpowering here. It was definitely swamp water, but there was something else. Iron. Blood? No, not human blood. Fish blood? Bait? And the cologne. It was screamingly loud here on the pavement.
I recognized the undertone now.
It wasn't just musk. It was Drakkar Noir, but vintage, the kind that lingers in elevators for 3 days. It was the scent of a man who hasn't updated his style since 1995. I looked at the stain on the driveway. I needed a sample. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a tissue. I dabbed the corner of the tissue into the oily spot. The liquid soaked in, turning the white paper a sickly yellow-brown. I quickly shoved the tissue into a Ziploc bag I had pre-positioned in my pocket. "Morning, Arthur." I jumped. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought a rib might crack. I spun around, nearly losing my balance. It was Greg. He was standing there, in his driveway, next to his wife's SUV. But he had left. I saw him leave. I saw the silver sedan reverse out at 6:15 a.m. "Greg," I choked out, I thought you were at work." Greg was smiling, but it wasn't his usual smile. Usually, Greg's smile is a reflex, a tightening of the facial muscles that doesn't reach the eyes. This smile was tight, strained. His skin was pale, almost waxy. He was still wearing his suit trousers, but his jacket was gone, and his tie was loosened. "Forgot my laptop," he said. His voice was too high, too airy. "Had to circle back. Just got here." "I didn't hear you pull in," I said, my eyes darting to the silver sedan parked on the street, 3 houses down. He hadn't pulled into the driveway. He had parked away and walked up. Why? "Sneaky car," he laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "So, what are you doing with my driveway, Arthur?" He was looking at the wet spot. He was looking at my pocket where the Ziploc bag was hidden. "Just saw some oil," I lied. "Thought it might be from the truck."
Didn't want it to stain your papers. You know how porous this concrete is. Greg looked at the spot. He stared at it. His nostrils flared. He smelled it. I saw the recognition hit him. His eyes widened, just a fraction. The color drained further from his face, leaving him looking like a gray sheet of paper. He knew that smell. "Right," Greg said. He didn't look at me. He couldn't take his eyes off the spot. "Oil. Thanks, Arthur. Always looking out for us." "Is Linda home?" I asked. The question was a probe, a needle inserted into the dynamic to see what bled. Greg's head snapped up. "Why?" "Just thought I saw a taxi earlier. Wondered if she was okay." Greg's jaw clenched. A muscle feathered in his cheek. "She's fine. Sleeping. She's not feeling well. Stomach bug." "Ah," I said. "The taxi. She went to the pharmacy. 24-hour one. Early this morning. Couldn't drive. Dizzy." The lie was clumsy. It was constructed of cardboard and tape. The pharmacy is 2 miles away.
You don't take a rusted Crown Vic taxi to the pharmacy at 6 a.m. when you have 2 cars, or when your husband is home, if he was home then. And if he wasn't home, why didn't she call him? "Well," I said, standing up and brushing off my knees, "hope she feels better. That smell, it's nasty. Might want to hose it down." "I will," Greg said. His voice was dropped an octave. It was cold now. "I'll take care of it, Arthur. You go on home." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. I nodded and backed away. I walked across the street, feeling his eyes drilling into my back. I didn't turn around until I was safely inside my front door. I locked it. I engaged the deadbolt. I ran upstairs to the observation post. Greg was standing over the spot on the driveway. He wasn't hosing it down. He was crouching over it, touching it with his bare finger. He brought his finger to his nose. He recoiled. He stood up violently, wiping his hand on his trousers, his suit trousers. He looked at the front door of his own house with an expression I had never seen on a suburban husband before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't worry. It was terror. He marched to the front door, hesitated, and then unlocked it. He went inside. The stage was set. The players were in position. And I had the sample. I went to my desk and pulled out the Ziploc bag. The tissue was pungent. I sealed the bag tight, squeezing the air out. I needed to analyze this. I am not a chemist, but I possess resources. I have a microscope. I have internet access. I have a working knowledge of local geography. I pulled up Google Maps on my tablet. I switched to satellite view. Where is the nearest location that combines? 1. Gray clay/mud. 2. Brackish water. 3. Seclusion, implied by the cheating/hiding. I scanned the map. The river winds through the industrial district to the east. That's mostly concrete embankments. No clay. To the west, the reservoir. Clean water, red dirt. To the south, the dredge. The dredge is a reclaimed wetland area that failed reclamation. It's a maze of half-built canals, stagnant pools, and overgrown reeds near the old cannery. It's a dead zone. Teenagers go there to smoke.
Criminals go there to dump stripped cars. And right next to the dredge, on the frontage road, is the Blue Heron Motel. I zoomed in on the Blue Heron. It's a dive, 1 star. Reviews mentioned bed bugs and strange noises. I looked at the reviews. Smells like the swamp when the wind blows. User Traveler 88. The pieces were clicking together. The smell on the purse was the smell of the dredge. The clay was the mud from the banks of the canals. But whose shoes were those? Greg wears size 10. I know this because I once accepted a package for him that contained shoes. The shoe in the purse was large. It looked like a 12 or a 13, a giant shoe. I sat back, watching the house. At 9:45 a.m., the shouting started. It was muffled by the walls, by the double-paned glass of both our houses, but sound carries on a quiet morning. It was a low rumble at first, then spikes of treble, a woman's scream, a man's roar. I saw movement in the living room window of number 42, a shadow thrown against the curtains. A lamp fell over. I saw the shade topple. I grabbed the phone.
Do I call the police? Hello, my neighbors are arguing and it smells like a swamp? No, not yet. Physical violence mandates a call. Shouting is just marriage in crisis. I held the phone, thumb hovering over the keypad. The front door flew open. Greg stumbled out. He was holding the ox blood bag. He threw it onto the lawn. The bag opened midair. Contents scattered across the perfect green fescue. I scrambled for the binoculars. This was the jackpot, the payload. Items identified. 1. A wallet. 2. A bundle of cash, thick, rubber-banded. 3. The other shoe, matching the first. 4. A gun. I froze. A gun.
It was a revolver, snub-nosed, silver. It lay in the grass, gleaming innocently next to a sprinkler head. Greg stared at the gun. He put his hands on his head. He looked like he was going to vomit. Linda appeared in the doorway. She wasn't the disheveled wreck from earlier. She had showered. She was wearing a bathrobe. Her hair was wet. She looked cold. She looked like ice. She walked out onto the lawn. She didn't look at Greg. She walked past him. She knelt down and picked up the gun. My breath stopped. She didn't point it at him. She checked the cylinder. She snapped it shut. She put it in the pocket of her robe. Then she picked up the cash, then the wallet. She left the shoes. She stood up and looked at Greg. She said something. I couldn't hear it. I would give my right arm to hear it, but I can read body language. She pointed at the shoes, then pointed at the street. Get rid of them. Greg looked at the shoes. He looked at her. He slumped, the posture of a defeated man. He nodded. Linda turned and walked back into the house. Greg stood there for a long minute.
He looked around. He looked at my house. I ducked below the sill, heart pounding. Had he seen me? I waited 10 seconds, then slowly peeked over the edge. He was gathering the shoes. He picked them up by the laces, holding them away from his body. He walked to his car, the silver sedan on the street, popped the trunk, and threw them inside. Then he got in the car and drove away. He left the oxblood bag on the lawn. The street fell silent again. The bag lay there, a deflated lung on the grass. I knew what I had to do. I had to retrieve that bag. The shoes were gone. The gun was gone. The money was gone. But the bag itself, the bag would have residue. It would have receipts. It would have the smell. But I couldn't go now. It was broad daylight. Linda was inside. I had to wait for nightfall. The hours between 10 a.m. and sunset were an agony of waiting. I maintained a vigil. I ate a sandwich at the window. Ham and cheese, no mustard. I documented every car that passed. 12:15 p.m., delivery truck, Amazon, dropped package at number 44.
Driver paused, looked at the bag on the lawn at 42, shrugged, moved on. 2:30 p.m., school bus. No children at 42, but the noise cover would have been useful. 4 p.m. The sky began to darken. Rain was coming. If it rained, the evidence on the bag would be washed away. The swamp mud, the scent. It would be diluted. I couldn't wait for night. I needed a distraction. I looked at my own lawn, the sprinklers. If I turned on my sprinklers and perhaps accidentally adjusted one of the heads to spray across the street. No, that's impossible. Too much distance. Wait. The dog walker. Mrs. Gable walks her golden retriever, Buster, at 4:30 p.m. every day. Buster is an agent of chaos. He loves leather. At 4:28 p.m., I saw Mrs. Gable turning the corner. I ran downstairs. I grabbed a dog treat from the jar I keep for bribery purposes. I exited my house and walked to the curb, timing my interception. "Afternoon, Mrs. Gable," I called out, forcing a jovial tone that felt alien in my throat. "Oh, hello, Arthur," she waved. Buster tugged at the leash, tail wagging. I knelt down. "Hi, Buster."
Good boy. I offered the treat. He devoured it. While patting him, I whispered, "Go get it, boy." I pointed subtly across the street at the bag. Buster smelled the treat on my hand, but then his nose lifted. He smelled the bag, the musk, the rot. Dogs love rot. He lunged. "Buster, no!" Mrs. Gable shouted, the leash burning through her hand. Buster broke free. He didn't run to me. He ran across the street. He went straight for the oxblood bag. "Buster!" Mrs. Gable shrieked, trotting after him. I followed, feigning concern. "Oh dear, let me help." We reached the lawn of number 42. Buster was sniffing the bag enthusiastically. He lifted his leg. "No!" I shouted, diving forward. I wasn't saving the bag for Linda. I was saving the evidence. I grabbed the bag by the strap just as Buster prepared to mark it. "I've got it!" I yelled. Mrs. Gable grabbed Buster's collar. "Oh, I am so sorry. I don't know what got into him." It's fine," I said, holding the bag. It was heavy, empty of the gun and money, but still heavy with the leather and the residual dampness. I'll put this on the porch for Linda," I said. "Thank you, Arthur. You're a saint." Mrs. Gable dragged the reluctant dog away. I stood on the Harrison lawn, holding the bag. I walked to the porch. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't knock. I looked at the bag in my hands. I had maybe 10 seconds before someone saw me or Linda came out. I opened it. The smell wafted up, weaker now, but still distinct. I peered inside. The lining was silk, champagne-colored, now stained brown. I saw a piece of paper stuck to the bottom, matted into the slime. A receipt. I reached in, my fingers grazing the cold, wet silk. I peeled the paper off. It was sodden, dissolving. I couldn't read it there. I shoved the paper into my pocket. I placed the bag on the doormat. I turned and walked away, trying to keep my pace measured, trying not to run. I got back to my house. I went straight to the kitchen. I laid the wet scrap of paper on a paper towel.
It was thermal paper, fading fast. The moisture was killing the ink. I grabbed a magnifying glass.
Blue Heron Motel, room 104. Checked in last night, paid cash. So she was there, with a man who wears size 13 shoes and smells like 1995. But why the gun? Why the mud? If you are having an affair at a motel, you don't get covered in swamp mud unless you leave the room and go into the swamp. And you don't bring a gun unless you expect trouble, or unless you are causing trouble. I looked at the receipt again. There was a timestamp for checkout, or rather, there was no checkout time. It just said, 1 night.
My mind raced. The news. I turned on the small TV in the kitchen. I switched to the local news channel. 5 p.m. broadcast. Breaking news, the anchor announced. She looked serious. Police are investigating a suspicious discovery at the old cannery dredge this afternoon. My blood ran cold. 2 fishermen discovered a vehicle partially submerged in the canal. Police have confirmed it is a late-model sedan. No bodies have been recovered yet, but divers are on the scene. A vehicle. The car is reported to be registered to a local businessman who has been missing since yesterday evening. Police are withholding the name pending notification of kin, but sources say he is a prominent real estate developer. Real estate. Greg is in insurance. But who does he insure? I went back to the window. The silver sedan, Greg's car, was back. He had returned. He was sitting in the car in the driveway, head on the steering wheel. Linda came out of the house. She was dressed again. Sharp. Professional. Black blazer. Gray slacks. She looked like a lawyer or an undertaker.
She tapped on the window of the car. Greg looked up. She opened the door. She pulled him out. She hugged him. It wasn't a romantic hug. It was the hug of a coach comforting a player who just blew the game but needs to get back on the field. She whispered in his ear. He nodded, wiping his eyes. They walked into the house together. The narrative was shifting. It wasn't simple cheating. Hypothesis: Linda wasn't the one cheating, or if she was, the lover is now submerged. The shoes, the size 13 shoes. Greg threw them in the trunk. If those shoes belong to the lover, why does Greg have them? Why is he disposing of them? Unless Greg found them. Let's rewind. Linda goes to the motel to meet the lover, the developer. Something goes wrong. The developer gets violent, or maybe Linda ends it. A struggle. The gun comes out. They end up in the swamp. The developer ends up in the swamp. Linda flees, covered in mud, losing her car. Maybe she drove his car into the water. She takes a taxi home. But where does Greg fit in? Greg came home at 6:15 a.m. to find her missing?
No, he left for work. He came back when I confronted him. Wait, the shoes were in the bag. If Linda killed the lover, why bring his shoes home? That makes no sense. You leave the evidence at the scene. You don't bag it up and bring it to the suburbs. Unless the shoes aren't the lover's. Unless the shoes belong to Greg. I scrambled for my logbook. Search query, Greg Harrison shoe size. I had noted size 10, but was I sure? I checked the entry. November 12th, Zappos box. Label read, men's loafer, size 10. Okay, so Greg is a size 10. The muddy shoes were huge, definitely not his. So why is he protecting her? He threw the shoes away. He is an accomplice. The sun set. The streetlights flickered on. The amber glow bathed the cul-de-sac in a false warmth. I needed to see what was happening inside that house. I went to the closet and retrieved the telescope. It's a Celestron, high aperture. I usually use it for astronomy, but it focuses remarkably well at 75 yards. I set it up in the bedroom, lights off. I aimed it at the living room window of number 42. There was a gap in the curtains, just a sliver. I peered through the eyepiece. They were in the kitchen. Linda was cooking.
She was chopping vegetables. The knife rose and fell with rhythmic precision. Chop, chop, chop. Greg was sitting at the island. He had a glass of brown liquid. Whiskey. He was shaking. He kept looking at his hands. Linda stopped chopping. She put the knife down. She walked over to him. She put her hands on his shoulders. She massaged them. She kissed the top of his head. Then she reached into her pocket, the pocket of the blazer, and pulled out the gun. She placed it on the counter, right next to the salad bowl. Greg stared at it. She pushed it toward him. She said something. I saw her lips move. Your turn? No. You promised? No. It looked like, it's done. Greg picked up the gun. He weighed it in his hand. Then he stood up. He walked out of the kitchen, out of my view. Linda went back to chopping vegetables. Where did Greg go? I scanned the house. Bedroom? Bathroom? Garage? A light flicked on in the garage.
There's a small window on the side of their garage. I adjusted the telescope. Greg was in the garage. He was opening the trunk of the silver sedan. He took out the shoes, the muddy size 13s. He didn't throw them away. He put them on a workbench. He took a bottle of bleach, a scrub brush. He began to clean them. He was scrubbing the evidence. Why? If they aren't his and they belong to a dead man, presumed, why clean them? Why keep them? Unless the man isn't dead. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Update. Vehicle recovered from dredge identified. Registered to Harrison Development Corp. Harrison Development Corp. Greg Harrison. My stomach dropped. Greg is the developer. I thought he was insurance. I quickly Googled Harrison Development Corp. CEO Gregory Harrison. Okay, so the car in the swamp is Greg's car, but Greg is here, and his silver sedan is here. Does he have another car? The website lists company vehicles. A black Lexus. Linda drives a white SUV. Greg drives a silver sedan. The black Lexus is the work car. So Greg's work car is in the swamp.
And Linda came home smelling like the swamp. And Greg is scrubbing a pair of size 13 shoes. Does Greg have dig feet? Did I get the size wrong? Or was the Zappos box for someone else? Maybe a gift. Or maybe Greg isn't Greg. No, that's insane. I've watched him for 5 years. He is Greg. Let's look at the shoes again. I refocused the telescope. Greg was scrubbing hard. The gray clay was dissolving. The leather underneath was distinct. Two-tone. Spectator shoes? No. Bowling shoes? No.
The kind of shoes an old man wears, or a man with a foot condition, or a disguise. Greg finished scrubbing. He held the shoes up. They looked brand new now. He put them in a box. He put the box on a shelf behind a row of paint cans, hiding them. He turned off the garage light. He went back inside. I sat back in my chair. The pieces were floating, refusing to lock. 1. Car in swamp. Greg's company car. 2. Linda covered in swamp mud. 3. Giant shoes brought home, cleaned by Greg, hidden. 4. Gun produced by Linda, given to Greg? No, left on counter. 5. The smell of cheap cologne. The cologne is the key. Greg doesn't wear that cologne. But if Greg's car is in the swamp and Linda was there, did Linda drive Greg's car into the swamp? Why? To fake his death? But he's alive. He's right there eating salad. Insurance fraud? If Greg is missing, according to the news, but he is actually home, then they are hiding him. But he drove home. I saw him. Wait, the news said missing since yesterday evening, but I saw Greg leave at 6:15 a.m. this morning.
Did I? I grabbed the logbook.
06:15 a.m. Subject Greg Harrison departs. Silver sedan. I assumed it was Greg. I saw the car. I saw a man in a suit. But did I see his face? The sun hadn't fully risen. The visor was down. What if it wasn't Greg driving the car at 6:15 a.m.? What if it was the man with the size 13 shoes, the man smelling of cheap cologne? And then Greg, the real Greg, appeared at 9 a.m., walking up the driveway. So, imposter Greg left at 6:15 a.m., real Greg arrived at 9 a.m., Linda arrived at 6:45 a.m., smelling of the swamp where the company car is. This is a replacement scenario. Or a body double. No, too Hollywood. Let's look at the lover angle again. Linda has a lover. The lover is a big man, size 13 feet, smells like Drakkar Noir. He drives Greg's company car, stolen, borrowed. Something happens at the motel swamp. The car goes in. Linda saves the lover. No, she brings his shoes home. Why shoes? Because he can't walk? Because he's dead. If he's dead and she brought his shoes and Greg is cleaning them, Greg is cleaning the shoes of his wife's dead lover.
That is a level of cuckoldry that defies physics, or a level of pragmatic villainy that is terrifying. I needed to check the trash, the wet tissue, the receipt. I have those. But what else was in the bag? The wet textile she shoved in. The bloody shirt? She took the bag inside. The bag I rescued from the dog. I left it on the porch. She took it in. If there was a bloody shirt in there, she would wash it or burn it. They have a fireplace. I looked at the chimney. No smoke. They have a washing machine. I can't see the laundry room. It's in the basement. But the trash. Tonight is Tuesday. Trash is Thursday. If they put anything in the bins now, it sits there for 2 days. Risky, unless they plan to take it to a dumpster. I watched the house. 8 p.m., 9 p.m. The lights went out downstairs. Lights on in the master bedroom. Shadows moving. 10:30 p.m. The bedroom light went out. The house was dark. I waited. 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m., the witching hour. I dressed in black, hoodie, cargo pants, gloves. I took my grabber tool, modified with rubber tips for silence.
I slipped out the back door. I navigated my backyard, climbed the low fence into the side alley, and approached the Harrison house from the rear. Their bins are kept on the side of the garage. I crept up to the plastic monoliths. I carefully lifted the lid of the general waste bin. It squeaked, a high-pitched mouse squeak. I froze. Silence. I opened it fully. Smell of garbage. Profit grounds. I shone my pen light, red lens to preserve night vision and reduce glare. On top, vegetable peelings, kale stems. I moved the peelings with the grabber. Below, a Ziploc bag. Inside, a dark, sodden mass. The shirt. I reached in with the grabber. I pinched the bag. I lifted it out. It was heavy. I held it up to the faint light. It was a man's polo shirt, or what was left of it. It was shredded, and it was stained, not just with mud. Dark, crusty stains. Blood. And fur? I looked closer. They were tufts of gray fur matted into the blood. Wolf? Dog? I put the bag in my backpack. I dug deeper. Another bag. This one contained bottles. Small glass vials. Labels. Testosterone cypionate.
Anastrozole. Steroids. The lover was juicing. Explains the aggression. The musk. Hormonal sweat. I dug deeper. A wallet. Leather. Slimy. I opened it with gloved fingers. Driver's license. Photo. A beefy man. Thick neck. Goatee. Name. Lance, the Hammer, Koblowski. Address, 104 Blue Heron Motel, listed as permanent residence? No, that's the motel. Address is a P.O. box. Lance, size 13 shoes, steroids, gun. I took the wallet. I gently lowered the lid. I had the shirt. I had the ID. I turned to leave. A floodlight blinded me. Click. The motion sensor light above the garage. I had triggered it. I froze. I was a deer in the headlights, a ninja in the spotlight. The back door of the house opened. Greg stepped out. He was holding the revolver. "Who's there?" he called out. His voice wasn't shaky anymore. It was steady, dangerous. I crouched behind the bins. "I can see you," he said. "Come out." I had two choices. Run. He might shoot. He's on edge. 2. Bluff. I stood up slowly, keeping my hands visible. "It's me, Greg. Arthur." Greg lowered the gun slightly.
He squinted against the light. "Arthur? What the hell are you doing in my trash?" "I heard a raccoon," I said. My voice sounded thin, pathetic. "Saw it run this way. Thought it might tip your bins. You know how they are." Greg stared at me. He didn't buy it. Not for a second. He looked at the backpack on my shoulders. "Did you catch the raccoon, Arthur?" "No. It got away." "What's in the bag?" "Just my bird-watching gear. I was night spotting. Owls."
Greg took a step forward. The gun was at his side, but his finger was on the trigger guard. "You're a terrible liar, Arthur. You always have been. We see you in the window, every day." My blood froze. They knew. "We don't mind," Greg continued, taking another step. He was 10 feet away now. I could smell the whiskey on him. He smiled. It was terrifying. "But boundaries, Arthur. We have to have boundaries. The trash, that's private." "I'm sorry," I said, backing away. "I'll go." "Did you take anything?" Greg asked. "No." "Show me." He raised the gun, just a little, pointed at my chest. I hesitated. If I showed him the bloody shirt and the wallet of Lance the Hammer, I was dead. "Greg, please. I'm just a nosy neighbor. I didn't mean any harm." "Show me." Suddenly, a siren wailed, close. Blue and red lights flashed against the houses at the end of the street. Police. Greg looked toward the street. Ideally, this was my chance to run. But the police car wasn't passing. It was turning into the cul-de-sac. It pulled up to number 42. Greg cursed. He tucked the gun into his waistband at the small of his back. "Go," he hissed at me. "Get out of here. If you say a word, Arthur, I know where you sleep." I scrambled over the fence. I tore my pants. I didn't care. I fell into my own yard. I crawled to the back door. I locked it. I collapsed on the kitchen floor, clutching my backpack. I crawled to the front window. 2 police officers were at Greg's front door. Greg answered it. He looked calm, confused. Linda appeared behind him. She looked sleepy. They were talking. The officers were gesturing. They were asking about the car in the swamp. Greg was shaking his head. He pointed to his silver sedan. Then he shrugged. He looked like the victim of a theft. "Oh my God, my work car was stolen." The officers were taking notes. They didn't search the house. They didn't check the garage. They didn't check the trash. They left. Greg and Linda stood on the porch watching them go. Then they both turned. They looked directly at my house. They looked directly at my window. I ducked. I sat in the dark.
I opened the backpack. I pulled out the wallet. I pulled out the shirt. I looked at the shirt again. The fur. It wasn't wolf fur. It was synthetic. It was costume fur. I pulled out the wallet again. I looked behind the license. A business card. Fur Real Mascots, Party Rentals and Events. Lance Koblowski, performer. Mascot? The hammer wasn't a wrestler. It was a mascot? I looked at the receipt from the Blue Heron again. Why would a mascot meet Linda at a motel? And then I remembered the smell. Musk. Animal. Not real animal. Costume animal. The smell of a suit that has been sweated in by 100 different men and never cleaned. The smell of a mascot suit. Linda wasn't cheating with a developer. She was with a mascot. But why the blood? Why the gun? I went to the computer. I searched for real mascots. News article from 2 years ago. Mascot ring busted in smuggling operation. Costumes used to transport narcotics across state lines. My God. The oversized shoes. Clowns wear big shoes. Mascots wear big shoes. You can fit a lot of product in a size 13 mascot shoe.
Linda's purse. She came home with the shoes. Greg cleaned the shoes. They weren't hiding a murder weapon. They were cleaning the transport containers. The car in the swamp? A diversion. A way to ditch the rest of the costume. I looked at the shirt. The blood. Was Lance dead? Or was it fake blood? I touched the stain. It crumbled. It smelled like iron. It was real. Okay, working theory. Linda is a mule. She meets Lance, the mule, at the motel to do a pickup exchange. The swap goes wrong. Lance gets shot, or Lance shoots someone. Linda grabs the goods, the shoes, filled with drugs/cash. She flees. Greg is the cleaner/launderer. The Harrison Development Corp is a front. The Perfect Suburban Life is a cover. I looked out the window. The lights at 42 were out again. But I knew they weren't sleeping. They were waiting. And now they knew I had the trash. They knew I had the wallet. I was no longer just the audience. I was in the play. I needed to secure the evidence. I needed to make a copy of the logbook. I needed to upload the photos to the cloud.
As I typed on my keyboard, the screen flickered. The internet connection dropped. No signal. I checked my phone. No service. I heard a sound downstairs. A click. The sound of a lock being picked, or a key code being entered. I remembered what I saw earlier, Linda entering the code on her door. She didn't use a key. Most of the houses in this neighborhood were built by the same developer, Harrison Development Corp. Greg built these houses. Greg knows the master codes. I heard the front door open. Soft footsteps on the stairs. The floorboards groaned. It wasn't the heavy tread of Greg. It was the click-clack of heels. And the smell. It drifted under my door. Swamp water. And musk. I grabbed the telescope tripod. It was the only weapon I had. I stood facing the door. Arthur? Her voice was sweet. Sing-song. Arthur, honey? We need to talk about boundaries. The doorknob turned.